If you work with children with autism who use AAC, this is the episode for you. We are diving into the very latest research on clinical practice on how to implement AAC effectively with children with autism, how to do an assessment so that you can make good decisions regarding AAC devices. What we're going to go through today is a 36-page long protocol. Don't worry, I'm not going to go through all 36 pages. But I am going to go through the jewels in this protocol that I think you can use on your back porch on Monday morning that have evidence to support them. I'm also going to go through some of the areas that you're going to want to think twice about that the latest research simply does not support. So there's areas of this protocol that I would actually advise against based on the latest research. Now, that said, I am very grateful for this research because it really does forward our practice and our knowledge of AAC and how we can provide AAC to children with autism. There's a lot of great information in these protocol, and that's why it's worth going through. That said, we have to caveat emptor, buyer beware. You have to critically read research and you have to see the strengths and the weaknesses, and you have to think twice before implementing weaknesses into your practice. So let's dive into these articles, and I say this with the greatest amount of respect for the researchers and appreciation for the work they do that is forwarding our practice. Thank you for this protocol that you're sharing with us. And I will, of course, share the link in my show notes so you can dive into it yourself and use it in your own practice, see what works and what doesn't work. So let's dive in, okay? I am kind of giving you a look on my back porch. I am an avid reader of research. My love language is learning, and my passion, as you know, on my mission is changing lives. And we do that as speech pathologists when neuroplasticity is at the greatest level by treating the whole child, but doing it in an intelligent manner. And what I mean by doing it in an intelligent manner is that you respect time. Time, effort, and energy is your most valuable resource, more so for the children we work with when neuroplasticity is at its greatest level. So, what we want to do when we're in therapy is we want to do what moves the needle. What are those active ingredients that is going to create lifelong change for this child for the next 100 years of their lives? That means we want to take what doesn't work and we want to get it out of your practice. You've got to be very, very discerning about not having fluff in your practice, about not having things that don't move the needle because there's a response cost. If you're spending time on that, you're not spending time on what moves the needle. That's why I take research so seriously and I research the details of the practice because the details really matter. That's why we're diving into this protocol. We're going to look at details and details that we can use on Monday morning. And we're going to look at details that maybe we want to chop it off of the chopping block because there isn't the numbers, there isn't the research to support this when we look at meta-analytic data. So this is something that's not going to move the needle. The research indicates if you are a speech pathologist, regardless of the severity of the child you're working with, you have a total of 30 to 45 minutes a week that you're working with that child. And I know a lot of people say, well, you just educate the adult. And the adult has all the time in the world. They don't. Okay. Not that I'm against parent education. I'm totally for it. But we are all restricted when it comes to time. So we have to be very clear about taking all of our time and all of our energy and putting those eggs in that basket that is going to move the needle, that is going to change this child's life, the active ingredients. So that is why we're always reading research. That is why we're always putting the active ingredients out, we're cutting the fat. So you have to be very, very clear. A lot of my CIS members email me and they're like, these are goals I have for this child with autism. And there's everything under the sun to work on. They're going to label a variety of objects. They're going to answer yes, no questions. They're going to follow multiple step directions. They're going to read high and by. There's like, there's 10 goals here, and then we're covering everything under the sun. When you do that, you're not doing what matters. This child has no symbolic way to communicate. Oh, is that goal number 11? So you're going to work on that less than 10% of the time so you can hit the other 10 goals? This is problematic. This is what is not moving the needle and what is going to move the needle. And we need to put all of our eggs in that basket that's going to move the needle. So I'm very passionate about this because this is just how you're going to create change. And you're not going to create change when you have that little 30 to 45 minutes a week that you have with that child going in a million different directions. Let's dive in. I'm giving you a look into my life and how I consume research. I have my coffee, so grab your coffee if you're going to join me on this. I've got my black pen. Here it is. Got it in my left hand here. I write sideways so I don't get ink on my hand if I have the paper wrap and get ink all over it. So I'm a sideways writer. Something you probably didn't need to know. But when I look at this research, the first thing that you always want to do is you want to look at the abstract. Okay, so what information do you have to share with me and what were your conclusions? Okay, you can get that on a Google search. If you are not a member of ASHA, so you can't get this article for free, Google search it. It tells you what you need to know. This is where I'm saying buyer beware. Buyer beware, so we have to be very clear about the statements they're making, and really, I think it's a little bit of a reach, and I'm going to tell you why. What they did is they looked at 7 clinical specialists. So these are people that have expertise clinically in providing AACs. I think they defined it as 50% or more of their clients use AAC. They interviewed these people that had 7 to 22 years of experience and asked them, is this valid, what we put in our protocol? Is this important when it comes to AAC to assess? Now, the reason I say, okay, this is buyer beware. When we look at research in quotes, expert opinion is the lowest level of research. It's not that reliable or that valid, someone's opinion, right? I look at that and I say, okay, so they're saying, is this valid? Well, the experts say it's valid, and these are people that are clinicians. Now, I respect clinicians, of course. I myself am a clinician, and when you're in it, you know it better than anyone when it comes to practice. However, unfortunately, there's a research to practice leg, in which you're looking at 17 years behind the research is our practice. In AAC research, there's been a lot of research that just came out meta-analytically in this past year that is really evolving how we do business. It's like turning how we did business in the last 20 years upside down. Things have very much changed in the last year, especially when it comes to the recommendations according to the meta-analytic research on AAC practice. We have to keep this in mind. We have a delay in what we're doing clinically. We got to remember this is valid because 7 people said so, and then they observed 2 children as well. This is not the highest level of research, a random controlled trial. We looked at this strategy versus this strategy, and all other things were the same, and we found that this strategy is more effective. This is the lowest level of research. This is expert opinion because people said so. And then the conclusion, I think this is really reaching when I read this article, is that this protocol that was validated, they say, because the experts agreed with high reliability that this is important, the clinicians did. They said the final version of the protocol has excellent content validity. Now, that is what I would say reach. When you have excellent content validity, it's because all of these strategies that you assessed, the research has shown in the numbers that these strategies are crucially important. It has empirical data to support each of the strategies that are being assessed. This is why I'm saying buyer beware. I would say the final version of the protocol has excellent content validity according to 7 clinical specialist in AAC. And let's just leave it at that because I'm diving into this article with you and I don't want to mislead you. If you're like, I'm not an expert in AAC and I'm providing intervention in AAC, because you're not alone. The majority of SLPs are providing AAC intervention and they feel like I don't have enough college coursework in it. I don't have enough continuing ed in it. I don't have enough staff support in it. I know this from my current research because this is what I'm studying in my doctoral program is basically we have all of these speech pathologists who are providing AAC intervention that are like, I don't have enough training in this. I don't have enough experience with this. So you're not alone. If you feel that way, that's okay. And that's why we're here. We are growing and it's going to be messy, but at least we're taking action, right? That's what we're doing today. And that's why I am very grateful to these authors because, hey, they're sticking their neck out there. They're saying, here's some suggestions. Here's a protocol. Here's something you can do. I'm giving you something to work with. I'm giving you the clay for you to mold. So I'm very grateful. But I'm telling you this because I want you to be very discerning when it comes to reading research and saying, okay, this is in this scenario, or this is according to these people, and really knowing the limitations of what you're dealing with. This is basically the article, and we're going to dive right into the protocol. I've told you the article, what's great about it is they say we have a problem, is that people, they have clients that are using AAC and they're saying, I don't know how to do an AAC assessment. They're saying, I don't know how to provide AAC. And the old days are gone where you just had this AAC fairy that would take care of everyone in the district and come around and do the AAC for all the children. It's like, no, now it's your job. But a lot of people are saying, I don't have the training and expertise for this. And this is why I'm so grateful for this 36-page long protocol that you can print out. Thank you, Dr. Lund, and your wonderful colleagues for giving us clay that we can mold and use on Monday morning in our practice. My back porch is different than your back porch. Now, what I'm walking you through is what I do every time I come across any research article. I printed this up maybe 2 hours ago. This is live. As you can see, I'm opening it with you. And I'm going to show you when I walk through this protocol, I'm going to say, oh, let's use that. Oh, I'm not sure about that. And here's why. Thank you so much to the authors. We're going to go and step through your protocol. I hope you can print this out on your own. And like I said, I'm going to leave a link so that you can access this and have fun with it yourself and see what works on your back porch and with your students. When we start it, there's the pre-evaluation session interview. This is gold. It just fleshes out, what is the child's routine like? The questions they ask is, who does the child communicate with? What are the environments in the child's day? What topics does the child need to be able to talk about, or what languages are spoken in their homes, and what languages do they understand? What we really need to know if we're going to make a plan for how can we integrate the AAC into their home environment. The next one, the current communication skills. This is great too. What is the child currently doing? Are they greeting? Are they initiating interactions? What do they do appropriately? How do they communicate inappropriately? We can comb through that and grab some great stuff, right? Then we go to something I do not like. And then I'm going to tell you why I do not like it, is this part on receptive language. What do you think the child understands? Can they follow directions? How many steps directions? Does the child respond appropriately to questions? The reason I'm not comfortable with these questions about what the child comprehends is because it's very difficult to tell with children with autism what they comprehend. The reason it's so difficult is a lot of us follow directions for social reasons. So if I tell you to do something, clap your hands and put your arms up, you're like, I'm going to do that because I have theory of mind and I know that that's going to please you when I clap my hands and I put my hands up. But if you don't have theory of mind and you don't know that if I do that, that's going to make you happy, or maybe the child has a motor coordination, motor impairment where they can't perform actions on demand. So it's really hard to base, when it comes to augmentative and alternative communication, what you're going to provide for the child based on what they can comprehend. It's very hard for you to know what children with autism can comprehend because of their sensory issues, because of their motor issues, and because of the social interaction issues. Then we get into expressive language questions, which I see value in. How do they currently communicate? This is something we're going to want to comb through that, and we're going to want to use that to find out where here we are at the baseline, because we know communication is multimodal. We want them using their gestures, we want them using sounds, we want them using speech, approximations, we want them using their pictures, their core boards, their sentence strips, everything. We want to know how you communicate. We communicate with pencils, our iPhones, our iPads, you get it, our text, our calling on the phone, so a Zoom call. We use a million different ways to communicate. So taking an inventory of how they're currently communicating is a great thing to do. Then we get to the next one, which is very important, motor issues. What are the motor issues of the child? So I have children that have extremely severe motor delays, and that really affects how I position the device and how I might have to give them some physical assistance to access the device because their motor skills are so severely impaired in the initial stages. Thank you for these wonderful fleshed out questions to consider when it comes to augmentative alternative communication. Then the next one they look at is they look at vision. So vision is going to become very important. Are there any vision issues and some health issues? And then we look at the behavior of the child, challenging behaviors. What do you think of the purposes of these behaviors? In this protocol, there's some wonderful jewels for you to take and to look at your back porch and to look at the kiddos you work with and see what is of greatest value. I'm loving this protocol, and I'm very grateful to Shelley Lund and her colleagues for really giving us a lot of great stuff to work with that we can use on Monday morning. Now, then we get into the preferred activities. This is extremely important. What activities does the child enjoy? And they have all of these great questions. What are their food items? We want to spend a lot of time here in finding out what is going to motivate this child to use this device. It's not going to motivate the child to give the child the device and be like, okay, where's the glue? And the child hates fine motor activities. This device is the worst. They're going to associate it with art activities. They hate art. And you're asking them where the crayons, the glue is, the scissors. You can tell I used to hate crafts when I was a kid. Oh, it's so fussy. I remember saying, why do we have scissors when we could just like rip the paper? It'd be so much faster. Then I would take the crayons and I'd peel the paper off and put them on the side and just do it that way. A little bit about my history. I wasn't a fan of arts and crafts. These are things that we're not going to use when it comes to the AAC device. They're going to be like, I hate that thing. Oh, I associate it with activities I hate. We want to associate and pair it with things that they love. So look at all these jewels we're going to get from this protocol. I highly encourage you to go to this protocol, print it out, and pick through it. Do something different. Word it differently for your kiddos. Make it work for your back porch. This is super important. We don't talk enough about this, is their literacy knowledge. So it's just these children, can they already read? Do they have letters, numbers, all of that knowledge? This is super important. Go through this protocol. Look at these questions and say, yes, yes, I want you to cherry pick. I want you to say, this is 36 pages long. You don't need 36 pages, but oh my goodness, I do want to know if they know their letters. I do want to know if they know the sounds the letters make. Oh, I do want to know if they recognize sight words. This is crucially important. A lot of times I've heard people say, for instance, oh yeah, when we use the high-tech AAC devices, I deactivate the letters and the numbers or in the phonics part, because then they're just going to go and press the letters all day, or they're going to press the phonics part. And I'm like, no, 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 no. That's the most important key. We want these children to learn how to write, knowing that the research indicates that as high as 30% of children with autism are not going to develop speech. We would love for them to share their message through writing, through literacy. Literacy development is extremely important. So don't take the letters away. Don't take the sounds away. This is how they're going to learn to write, is having mastery of the letters, having mastery of the sounds each of the letters make so we can blend them together and make words. Next, we're going into experience with technology. What about the family? What is their experience with technology, or do they have no experience? And these are great, fabulous questions. And I'm very grateful to these researchers for sharing this wonderful resource for you that's really in depth, that you can really cherry pick through, knowing the kiddos that you work with, knowing your back porch, knowing what you're offering, and knowing which questions are going to be of most importance to you. We went through these questions, and then they have you screen the child after that with the AAC device. And if you're screening the child, you just met the child, I would say you screen the child with objects that the child loves, with objects the child prefers. The child has no relationship with you. I would not use this time to ask this child fact-based questions and see how they respond. That's one of those questions where you really testing the child's ability or the child's social skills and their ability and theory of mind to know, I'm going to respond to a question from you to make you happy for social interaction purposes. I hope that you don't think that a child is less able than they are because they're not responding to a question because of aspects of the autism that would affect their response. They're like, okay, when you're checking out a device, everyone knows these things, but these are things that you could find out while you're asking the device. You could do a closed-ended question. And like I said, do this with things that the kids love. Okay. You could ask, is there any, okay, not, I wouldn't ask the example they want. Do you want glue or crayons? Like, oh, right. Most children with autism have fine motor delays. Like, neither. Instead, you could ask, like, do you want the blue car or the red car? If you want the red dinosaur or the yellow dinosaur, make a command. You know what I mean? Okay, press the dinosaur. So they have different ways that to see how they could use the device and do it around what the child loves. Here, now we get into the part where when I'm going to the protocol, I would definitely not use. And this is where we're starting to talk about being a gatekeeper. And when I don't like when people call people's name, don't be a gatekeeper, you're being a gatekeeper. But using language tests to decide what kind of language you should have on the device, right? Language tests are largely based on answering questions for social purposes. So a lot of it, you're not testing the child's capacity, you're testing the impact of autism on their ability to respond to questions and directions for social purposes. I definitely would not use standardized tests, and there's no research that would support using standardized tests for children with autism to decide what they should have access to on their board. A lot of times it's the behavior that the test is testing is their behavior, their sensory issues, their motor issues, their social challenges, not what they're capable of. So I would definitely not use language testing or cognitive testing. That was another thing in here to decide how robust the device should be, what kind of language or concepts should be included in it, because they're very, very unreliable when it comes to children with autism, particularly preschoolers with autism. That is something I would not measure. Then they look at some things that are interesting when it comes to dynamic assessment of language. And this is something that we really have to think about is if you have a child that is a Gestalt language learner that says phrases, so for instance, the children I work with that will say, for instance, see you later, alligator. And they say, see you later, alligator, when they want to be done with an activity. Like it's just kind of like, I don't want to do this anymore. See you later, alligator. Those are the kind of children you might think about with this AAC device. Instead of them having one word like go, using phrases like let's go. So using gestalts and having it's very easy to do instead of the single word phrases, knowing that this child doesn't speak in single word phrases. I mean, single word utterances, they speak in phrases. So when you're coming to the AAC device, you just simply want to capitalize on how they learn language instead of going against it and taking an analytic approach in which you do bit by bit. You can do the programming. So instead of it being play, it's saying let's play. You're giving them the phrases, seeing that this is kind of how you're showing me this is how you develop language. So I'm going to go with that instead of fight it. So I like that they have that here in the protocol as well. And I'm just going through it. I mean, you really are. If you're with me right now, this is an article I just printed out, and I'm just going through, okay, look at 36 pages of ideas that they have here, and what's research-based and what isn't research-based, and what can I use on my back porch, and that's what we're looking at here. And once again, this dynamic assessment of cognition, I definitely would not do that. This is not the time you just met this child off on a street and to be like, okay, I'm going to assess your cognition and say, okay, show me where the hamburger is when you look at all of these foods. And it's just like, why is the child not responding? Because of autism, there's so much more than is not just because the child doesn't know. There's so many other factors involved that I would really, really strongly advise against dynamically assessing a child's cognition by asking a neutral question and the child not responding for social purposes. So, because of the nature of autism. So, that is something I don't see any research to support. You can be like, oh, there's research to support. I don't see it. And so I really think that's one of those things that's a gatekeeper. So you know what this child with autism knows and doesn't know because they didn't respond when you asked him a question and gave him a direction. You're a stranger off the street with no consequence for it. Like you get nothing for it, just for social purposes, you don't respond. Then we look at the AAC features and portability. I think that, that's just like extra information, which I think everyone knows. Another thing is the array size. I think we really have to start thinking differently about this. And what the research is indicating, the latest meta-analytic research is more symbols is better. A larger array of symbols for children to start off with. And the neat thing about technology today, and don't move the symbols around and don't change the size of the symbols. Keep them in the same spot. But the neat thing about the technology today is you can make symbols that are less used by the child, not visible, so the child can develop that accuracy and that fluency in using symbols of things they love. Okay, so it's kind of like when you're on your phone, there's on the first page, you have your most used things. This is what I'm using all the time. But you don't delete the other apps. You know you're going to need your calculator on the phone. You're not going to delete it, but it's not going to be on the first page, right? So that's kind of like what it is. It's like, what do we want to be on the first page? And what we can do is instead of moving things around, we can just hide the other symbols so the child develops fluency and then show those other symbols as the child develops fluency with what they use most often. So this idea is very old-fashioned, and it's not research supported. It's research supported in that this is the old way of thinking is this gatekeeping where I'm going to give you one symbol and you're going to show me accuracy using that symbol 90% 2 days independently or 3 days at an 80% criterion. And then I'm going to go to two symbols and then you're going to show 90% 2 days or 80% 3 days. And then I'm going to go to three and then I'm going to go to four and then I'm going to five and I'm going to dial them out where you're going to have to prove yourself in order to have access to more symbols. Now, this is very old school, and this part of the protocol is not supported by the research. It's supported in that it's worked in a program. It was part of a program that's effective, right? But it's not the active ingredient. It's the dirt in the program, if that makes any sense. I hope that makes sense to you because when you look at array in itself, a limited array of symbols is not correlated to better outcomes. A bigger array of symbols is. So this is something, like I said, that I I think you Bhagavad Gita, you have to look at the research or what you're consuming or any intervention plan like a swan, and you need to say, where's the milk? Swallow it. Where's the dirt? Spit it out. And this is something that the research is not showing to be an active ingredient, limiting the number of symbols the child has access to. So we're looking at the, once again here, the number of trials. And once again, this is kind of like one of those things, let's see, to evaluate accuracy. You can't read these children's mind. You don't know what they want to say. Are they accurate in what they're saying? Did you know that they didn't want to point to what they pointed to? So just, I look at when I do my goals, I look at the frequency. How often do they use the device? And more qualitative data instead of saying how accurately they use it. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't read their mind. I don't know that they didn't want to press the elephant. Maybe they wanted to press the elephant to tell me about an elephant when we're talking about zoo animals because the elephant is their favorite, even though I'm carrying a zebra. I can't say wrong, right? So we have to be kind of careful about that. And so I think that this is a very, very nice protocol. I think it's a great protocol that everyone should print out. And then after that, they have an AAC glossary because also you're working with colleagues um, from like the ABA field that do talk a lot about iconicity of the symbols. Are you using real objects? Are you using photos? Are you using line drawings of it? Are you using simply the word? And it's a lot of that stuff. I consider it very old school because you see the child with the iPad and they go to the YouTube symbol and then they go to the next symbol and they go to the next symbol and they go in 2 seconds they're flat. They click on their favorite episode of Coco Melon, and then they'll go to into do their favorite episode of Bluey. Another 2 seconds flat. Okay, these children, they know their symbols. Okay, well, look at the number of array of symbols that they just flipped through. They looked through an array of 40 symbols to find those symbols. You have to use some common sense and say, uh, you know, maybe they don't have to prove themselves, in which I make them go through all these hoops and I ask them these questions and they answer for social purposes or whatever with me. And if they don't answer it right, then they don't get access to communication. That's what I mean by gatekeeping. We have to stop thinking that way. And instead, and when I stop thinking that way, stop asking, can they do that? Can they do that? And we need to ask, how could they do that? So what I'm saying is we want to give them everything. We want to give them the farm. And maybe, okay, we can make some symbols not visible for a little bit and then make them visible, so we can get some fluency with the device so that they feel fluent and comfortable. And then more symbols pop up all the time. But not saying I've got to test them and find out what they're capable of. Because I think another reason I feel strongly about this and is because we know that what I found is that most children with autism I work with, they learn language through their eyes. So what I mean by that is many of the children I work with learn to talk through reading. It's usually at the sentence strip. So I use robust communication devices on the iPad in conjunction with the sentence strip. I'll look at sentence strip. Most children start talking when they're reading and print referencing, look at, and then the word. They do that with my SIS membership materials. So those are their first words. Their first words are read. So would we really want to give them a device that only has 2 words for them to read and to see with their eyes to learn? I mean, can you imagine being in a world where you're only exposed to 2 words and that's it? So, because so many of our kids with autism learn language through their eyes, you want to make sure to give them a robust system of communication that has lots of vocabulary, that has lots of functions, that has lots of syntax. That's like, we're talking, we want to give them thousands of words at their fingertips for them to explore. And when they're exploring those words, it's kind of like for them, it's like they're hearing these words. It's like a child that's hearing these words. And when they're pushing these buttons, a lot of people say, oh, they're just stimming, they're just pushing buttons. That's babbling, that's exploring. When a child babbles, you don't say, they're not saying anything, they're just making sounds, they're just stimming. No, you respond to it. So we really have to give these children the time and space to explore language multimodally. So when they're using these robust devices, they're seeing the words with their eyes, paired with the picture, paired with the print. This is invaluable, right? This is good stuff. So you definitely don't want to be a gatekeeper and saying, well, I tested them and I've decided that they were accurate with an array of 4 symbols. They could answer at 90% accuracy. So I'm going to give them a device with 4 symbols on it. That's, that's crazy. That's like living in a world where you only hear 4 words. So that is my opinion. I kind of got off on my own little soapbox there at the end. But really, if you're going to err on some way, I prefer for you to err on the way in which you give them more access to language and ideas and concepts than less access, okay, when it comes to augmentative communication. So a lot of people say, I know that this sounds kind of like presumed competence, but like the thing is we need to stop asking, can they do it? And instead we need to ask, how? How can they do it? And that is the question to ask at the end of the day. So I want you to take all of this information. I hope you had fun with me going, this is what I do all the time. I go and read lots of research and we go through it and we dig through it and we get our jewels out and you get to go take those jewels and you get to go crack them open and design them any way you like and go put them in your practice and go and sparkle in your practice and help your children sparkle and shine using these jewels. Thank you so much to LSHSS for their wonderful article that they published that helps us move our field forward and improve our knowledge, and to Dr. Shelley Lund and her colleagues for this 36-page protocol. And like I said, this protocol is from 2017. So I bet you if Dr. Lund was to have an updated version today in 2025, I bet you would be very different. I bet you there would be a lot of edits in which she took out some of the areas, let's just say, that don't move the needle or maybe even move the needle back. So I respectfully go through this article with them, and I do it with great appreciation. So that said, let's take our sleeves, roll up our sleeves, and make the world a better place. One child at a time. You will always be